All right, welcome back to Good Vibes. We have Debbie Cox DeNova with us again, and we're going to talk today about synthesizing happiness. What does that mean? I don't know, but Debbie's going to tell me. So, Debbie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
All right, so synthesizing, it's a big word, you know.
Yeah.
People playing in music know about synthesizers and all that, but how do you synthesize happiness?
Okay.
What are we talking about here?
So it's really important. Everybody is chasing happiness in one shape or way or form, and it's really important to know what the research says when it comes to happiness and what actually creates happiness. A lot of people think it's associated with more money, for example, but the research actually shows that after a certain point, if you're coming out of poverty, you get out of poverty with money, it does increase your happiness score, but at about $75,000, it actually starts to go the opposite way. So there's a limit to that, right? Some people think it's success, right? But what we know is that the research shows that our brain, there's something called impact bias. And our brain will actually overinflate the level of happiness that we're going to get with specific goals. We think that it's going to last longer, that it's going to have more intensity. So when it comes to happiness, there are parts that we can control. There's a certain amount that we control, and there's a certain amount that we can't. What we know from research is that about 48% of our happiness is genetic. Okay, we know that from a study with twins that were separated at birth, came back at age 40, and so 48% is your mom, your dad, your lineage, your ancestors, right? And then we have a 40% at big life events, big things that happen in your life, okay? And then the other 12% is your day-to-day choices. Now, a lot of people will focus on those big life events, so getting married or getting the job promotion and things like that. I'm going to make the case for why we should be focusing on the 12% and how focusing on the 12% not only gets us regular happiness, but also will help us to achieve those big life events as well. Because what we know is that even though there's a spike in happiness when we achieve those results of getting the degree, getting the promotion, getting married, it's not as long, it doesn't last as long as they once thought it did. And a lot of this research, by the way, comes from Dan Gilbert, who wrote Stumbling on Happiness, and also Vanessa Van Edwards, which is one of my favorite.
So we're talking about anything that's euphoric gives you a jump.
Yeah.
But the euphoria is going to wear off, so you got to find some more stable ways to
Find
stay
more
happy.
stable ways, yes. So there are two types of happiness. There's natural happiness that comes from just naturally from events happening that are good for us, right? And then there's something called synthetic happiness, okay? What we know is that the brain with our prefrontal cortex is a really good experience simulator. No other animal can do what we can do. We can actually experience something without actually having to go through it, all right? Dan Gilbert makes the point that Ben & Jerry's doesn't have a liver and onions ice cream, not because they went to test it out and went, ew, this is gross, but because from your armchair, you can envision and you can actually experience what liver and onions ice cream would be like, and it's a no-go, right? So we're able to do this.
You just made me nauseated.
Exactly, exactly. So what happens, though, is that there's a different kind of happiness called synthetic happiness, where when life events are not going the way that we want, our brain can actually create the happiness. And even though we tend to think, oh, that's not real, we got to roll our eyes when someone says, oh, I didn't really want a date with her anyway, or I'm just as happy without that degree or without that experience. We kind of go, okay, yeah, no, it's not real, right? But actually, research shows that it is actually just as real and as enduring as the natural happiness. And this is good for us to be aware of, because what our society will push us to do otherwise is to chase at great cost, chase things that our mind might be associating with a certain level of happiness, but at the end of the day actually cost us quite a bit along the journey, and then doesn't give us the hit of happiness that we're after. So there is something called the free choice paradigm, and you may have heard about research. This experiment in different ways has been done over and over again with the same results. They take 6 different objects and you rate them according to how much you like them. So in this specific study by Harvard, they took Monet prints. And they took people and asked them to rate the Monet prints from 1 to 6. And then they said, well, we happen to have a couple of prints. You can take one home as a reward. We have 3 and we have 4. And so it's, it's kind of like in the mid-range of what they like. So, of course, people choose 3 because they like it a little bit better. Then a little time passes. They bring the participants back in and they ask them to evaluate and rate the 6 pictures again. And what's interesting is over and over and over again, what happens is that they rate the 3 at around a 2. So they increase the level that they like, the one that they have. And the 4, the one they left behind, they rate to a 5. So in other words, I was wrong before. This one is actually, the one I have is actually better, and the one I left behind is actually worse, over and over.
They're adjusting.
They're adjusting. However, again, it kind of brings to mind, oh, well, they're just making themselves feel better, right? But actually what they've shown with even amnesic patients, like we're talking about people who have the kind of amnesia where they remember their childhood, but if you walked in and say, hi, I'm Martin, and then walked back out of the room, they've forgotten who you are. They duplicated this with them as well and said, okay, and they said, between 3 and 4, which one do you want? Then they let them know that their painting was on the way. Came back in and said, hey, by the way, we were just here. They did a test to make sure that they didn't remember that they actually had a print, right? They usually just guessed which one they had. And then they did the experiment again, and what they found is even in amnesic patients who couldn't even remember that they owned the print, they were evaluating the one that they chose as better. It actually made changes in the brain, so the happiness was actually real. It really was.
But I bet if they'd have found a lot of cash in the frame of the Monet print, they would have been euphoric. Okay?
Absolutely.
Only for a little while.
Only for a little while.
Yeah. Liver and onion ice cream.
Yes.
But I got a question.
Sure.
We've been sort of taught by hearing people at the dinner table go, ugh. But what happens if we were young and our parents would have brought us to get ice cream and it was liver and onion and everybody was sitting around, especially the parents, going, this is so good.
Yeah.
Would our minds have made that ice cream good for the rest of our life?
That is a fascinating question, and I don't know the answer to that, but so you're talking about conditioning, right?
Yeah.
And so this could actually go back to synthetic happiness and creating experiences because you don't have a choice. And what's interesting is this is a good lead-in to the fact that freedom is actually a friend to natural happiness. Natural happiness, again, being the kind of happiness when things turn out the way that you want, then you're happy, right? But freedom has actually been shown to be the foe of synthetic happiness. Now, we've already determined that natural happiness and synthetic happiness offer the same amount of pleasure. In fact, when they compared lottery winners to paraplegics, like these are big life events, 2 big life events that happened. After a year, they came back, and these 2 groups of people were actually equally happy. Okay, but freedom, interestingly enough, is the foe of synthetic happiness. So they did a study where they took students Harvard students, right, and they took them through a photography class, and they said, listen, you're going to go and you're going to take pictures of very meaningful things on campus that you want to remember. So these students went out and they took pictures. They came back. They had a 6-hour course. They were taught how to use a darkroom. They were able to choose 2 of their favorite prints, 2 of the favorite photos, and get them printed out in these beautiful glossies. And then the news was dropped on them, hey, you get to keep one of them and we have to send one in to headquarters so that we have proof of this class. So now they're left with a dilemma, like which one of these should I choose? And so the students would choose, and now they're separated into 2 separate groups, okay? So some of the students were told, don't worry. If you change your mind within the next 4 days, then we can always switch them out. And we'll even contact you to see, and we'll even bring the print to you if you want to switch it out. The other group was told, you have to make the decision right away. We have to send the other print off within seconds after this, and no choice whatsoever. This is what they found. In the students who had no choice, in other words, they made their choice and it was a final decision, then the other print was going to be off. When they measured their happiness, the happiness that they had right afterward and even days later, 6 days later, was high. They really, really liked the picture that they chose. The people who had a choice actually reported less happiness with their choice right after they made it, and then days later, even after they no longer had the choice to switch it out, they were less happy with their choice. Now, we don't realize that synthetic happiness, that freedom is actually a foe to synthetic happiness. So they took brand new people, students in, and they said to them at the beginning of this same experiment, hey, you have 2 choices. You can either have 4 days to decide whether or not you want to switch out, or right away you make a decision and it's final. As predicted, 66%, most of the students actually said, I would rather have the choice. In other words, they were making the choice. They were choosing the experiment that would actually give them a lower satisfaction level, lower levels of happiness. So to your point, if you're conditioned to something, you have no choice. This is the dessert that we offer to you. You have, liver and onion ice cream. That would be a very interesting thing to note. Does the brain then synthesize happiness around this because you have no choice? Everyone in your community eats liver and onion ice cream.
Because when you're hearing that, like when you walk outside as a child and your mom and dad goes, the sky is blue.
Yes.
And you look up, okay, that's blue to me. It might be a different blue if you're colorblind, but that's blue by verbalizing it.
That's it.
So if they're eating liver and onions and going, boy, this is great ice cream, and you're a kid, you might grow up eating liver and onion ice cream and love it.
Absolutely. You absolutely might.
It's just a thought of the day.
Well, I will tell you this. There are some things that you can do to increase your happiness score. And when you're scoring, you can score from 1 to 10, being least satisfied at 1, most satisfied at 10, in 5 different categories. So family, career, friendships, day-to-day, and health. So score 1 to 10, then you're going to add all of those up, divide it by 5. That would be your happiness score. The average is about 6, okay?
So what is it again? What's the category?
So family, friends,
okay,
career,
okay,
day-to-day, so every day, how happy are you in your
Okay.
day-to-day choices, and health. Okay, so that would give you your baseline. The people who are the most happy, they actually report being excited in the morning when they wake up, whereas the ones who are not wake up with a sense of dread. The largest and most robust study around happiness started in 1938 and is still ongoing today. And I mean, super in-depth, 724 men from 2 groups, sophomores from affluent families at Harvard, okay, and then boys who were taken from the slums of Boston, the poorest, often with no running water, okay? And they followed them. They took blood samples, brain scans, they interviewed their kids, they recorded their conversations with their spouse. And what they found, and what they're finding still, is that the most singular thing that makes the most difference to health, happiness, longevity, to your brain health is relationships. The quality of your relationships. Can you let your guard down and be seen? Can you trust the people that you're with? It's not even about whether or not you have a spouse or partner, because dissatisfactory relationships actually lower the longevity and the brain health and the health of the individuals.
I scored 34, by the way.
You scored 34. Then you got to divide that by 5.
All right. Okay. So a little over 6.
Yeah. So about average. Yeah.
Okay,
So
about
you can
that.
actually do something by working on the choices,
Okay.
by increasing your gratitude, your relationships, and
All right, we're going to continue this talk.
Yes.
We've got 5 seconds to be happy.
yes.
We'll see you again next week.